At my younger sister's wedding, in front of 300 guests at St. Margaret's Cathedral, my father did something that would haunt him forever. He stood up during what should have been a sacred moment and made an announcement that shattered our family in ways he never saw coming. "I've sold Carter Legacy Industries to Summit Capital Group for $60 million, he declared with the pride of a king addressing his subjects. Then his eyes found mine in the third pew, and his voice turned cold as winter. "This secures the future for my real children, the ones who've earned their place in this family." He paused, letting the words hang in the perfumed air. "Emily, you've been nothing but a disappointment. You're getting nothing from my legacy. Nothing. You're no longer my daughter." 300 people turned to stare at me like I was roadkill on display. My mother closed her eyes in shame. My brother Anthony shifted uncomfortably but said nothing again. Even my sister Jessica, radiant in her $15,000 dress, looked mortified that her perfect wedding had become the stage for my public execution. They expected me to crumble, to cry, to run from the church in humiliation like the family failure they'd always believed me to be. Instead, I started laughing. Not a bitter laugh or a broken one, but the kind of laughter that comes from knowing a secret so devastating, so perfectly ironic, that you can barely contain your joy at the moment of revelation. "Dad," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the cathedral's perfect acoustics, "you're absolutely right. I am getting nothing from your legacy." I paused, savoring every second of his confusion. "But that's because I already own everything. I am Summit Capital Group. Congratulations, you just sold your entire life's work to the daughter you disowned." The silence that followed wasn't just quiet. It was the complete absence of sound, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. "That's impossible," he whispered, but his voice carried in the stunned silence. I reached into my purse and pulled out a leather portfolio, removing a set of documents that I'd been carrying for 3 weeks, ever since the sale was finalized. "Summit Capital Group," I read aloud, represented by Emily Carter, Chief Executive Officer. I held up the signed purchase agreement, his own signature clearly visible at the bottom. "Thank you for selling your legacy, Dad. I'll put it to good use." The cathedral erupted. What happened next destroyed a family dynasty, exposed years of embezzlement, and revealed that the so-called disappointment daughter had been playing a game so sophisticated that her own father never saw her coming. If you've ever been the invisible child, the one whose achievements were swept aside, the one who was told they weren't good enough by the very people who should have believed in them most, this story is your vindication. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's getting everything. But before I tell you how I pulled off the impossible, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I love connecting with viewers around the world. And if this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button because your support helps me bring you stories like this. Enjoy listening. Because this announcement was not the end. You see, to understand how I became the woman who could destroy my father with a single sentence, you need to know about the day he first destroyed me. And I'm talking about complete annihilation, the kind that breaks you so thoroughly that you either die inside or become someone entirely different. My name is Emily Carter, and I am 32 years old. You see, I've been fighting an uphill battle my entire life. While my brother Anthony got praise for bringing home C's, I got lectures for bringing home A-minuses. While Jessica got celebrated for making the cheerleading squad, I got ignored for winning the state science fair. Every family photo told the story. Anthony in the center with my father's arm around him, Jessica radiant beside my mother, and me slightly out of frame, like an afterthought they'd forgotten to crop out. Emily doesn't quite fit the family image. I'd overheard my mother telling a friend when I was 15. She's brilliant, but she lacks polish. Translation: I was the wrong kind of daughter for the Carter family brand. I was starved of love that my brother and sister freely got. But I harbored hope in my heart that one day I will be enough for my parents. That I just had to be perfect and achieve more. That was why 18 months before the wedding, I walked into the boardroom of my father's company, clutching my presentation that I believed would finally change everything. I was still that desperate girl trying to earn love through achievement. The conference room on the 32nd floor overlooked downtown Chicago, floor-to-ceiling windows, framing the skyline like a corporate cathedral. I'd spent 6 months developing Sentinel Core, a revolutionary AI cybersecurity platform that could predict and prevent data breaches before they happened. The technology was 3 years ahead of anything else on the market. "Gentlemen," I began, "what if I told you we could make our clients completely immune to cyber attacks?" My father's expression was already skeptical before I'd even begun. The board members, his golf buddies who'd known me since I was in pigtails, leaned back with polite but dismissive smiles. Last year alone, cybercrime cost American businesses over $6 billion. But Sentinel Core doesn't just respond to threats. It anticipates them using machine learning algorithms that... "Emily," my father interrupted, his voice cutting through my passion like a blade. "Stop!" The room fell silent. I stood there, laser pointer trembling, as he fixed me with that familiar look of disappointment. "We're not a tech company. We're relationship builders. Our clients don't want algorithms. They want human connection." "But Dad, the market is shifting. If we don't innovate, the market is fine exactly as it is." I felt my cheeks burning as the board members nodded in agreement. But then my father smiled, and I knew something terrible was coming. "However, since you're so passionate about innovation, I have exciting news." The conference room door opened to reveal a man I'd never seen before. Tall, impeccably dressed, with the kind of confident smile that belonged on magazine covers. "Meet Tyler Brooks," my father announced with obvious pride. Ivy League MBA, summa cum laude. His family founded Brooks and Associates. "Tyler will be joining us as our new Vice President of Innovation." Vice President of Innovation. The position I'd been working toward my entire career. Tyler stepped forward with practiced charm, delivering perfectly crafted corporate poetry about leveraging synergistic opportunities. My father beamed with pride he'd never shown for anything I'd accomplished. I cornered him afterward in his office. "Dad, I don't understand. I have my MIT degree. I know this company." "Emily," he said without looking up, "Tyler has what you don't. Credibility. When he walks into a room, people take him seriously." The implication hit like poison gas. "They don't see that in me. Give me one more chance. Let me work under Tyler." "Fine. You can assist Tyler. But he's in charge. His vision, his timeline. If you undermine his authority, you're done." I nodded eagerly, still believing talent would win out over politics. I was an idiot. Tyler's first move was gutting my Sentinel Core technology, reducing my revolutionary platform to a glorified antivirus program. Every suggestion I made got politely dismissed. Every meeting became a masterclass in professional invisibility. The killing blow came on a Tuesday evening. Working late, I heard laughter from the conference room. Through the glass walls, I watched Tyler presenting to the same board members who dismissed my ideas. He was showing them my slides, my research, my algorithms. But according to his presentation, he developed everything himself. My CyberGuard system represents a quantum leap in predictive security technology. He said. I stood there watching my own work being stolen in real time, feeling something inside me die. But the cruelest cut was still coming. That weekend, Jessica called about bringing someone special to family dinner. Someone she was really excited for us to meet. Tyler. Within minutes of walking into our dining room, he was charming my mother with boarding school stories and impressing my father with his so-called innovative thinking. I watched my family fall in love with the man who'd stolen my life's work and was now stealing my sister. 3 months later, Tyler called me into his office with a satisfied smirk. "Emily, I'm afraid your services are no longer needed. Your attitude has become problematic. You seem unable to accept that innovation requires vision, not just technical skills. You're firing me? For creating the technology you're taking credit for. I'm giving you the freedom to pursue your tech dreams elsewhere. Isn't that what you really want?" My father didn't even look up from his newspaper when I cleaned out my desk. Anthony was too busy to take my call. My mother suggested maybe this was for the best. Only Jessica seemed slightly uncomfortable, but she was too busy planning her engagement to the man who destroyed me to offer any real support. I left that building carrying everything I owned in a cardboard box, officially exiled from my own family's company for the crime of being too innovative. What I didn't know was that Tyler had one final twist of the knife planned. Within weeks, every tech company in Chicago had heard the same story. Emily Carter was difficult to work with, had unrealistic expectations, and couldn't function in collaborative environments. My MIT degree became worthless paper. My revolutionary technology became amateur coding. My 3 years of innovation became failed experiments. Tyler had systematically poisoned every well in the industry, ensuring I'd never work in tech again. And my parents did nothing to stop it. Somebody was actively sabotaging their daughter, and they didn't even care. That's when I realized something that would change everything. They hadn't just underestimated me, they created their own worst nightmare. Because when you destroy someone who refuses to stay destroyed, you don't just make an enemy, you make a ghost. And ghosts have a way of coming back when you least expect them. What followed were the darkest 18 months of my life. Getting fired from your own family's company is one thing. Trying to find work afterward when your former boss is systematically destroying your reputation is something else entirely. "I'm sorry, Miss Carter," the HR director at Cyber Solutions Incorporated said, sliding my resume back across her desk. "While your MIT credentials are impressive, we're looking for someone with more hands-on experience in enterprise environments." It was the same conversation I'd had at 12 different companies in 6 weeks. My technical skills were undeniable, my academic record was flawless, but somehow I lacked experience. What they really meant was that every reference check led back to Carter Legacy Industries, where Tyler had positioned himself as my former supervisor and was providing glowing recommendations that damned me with faint praise. Emily was very enthusiastic. I'd later learn he was telling potential employers, but she struggled with collaborative environments and had difficulty accepting feedback from senior leadership. The rejection letters piled up on my kitchen counter like evidence of my professional execution. MIT degree, summa cum laude, 3 years of innovation work, all rendered worthless by a man who'd stolen my ideas and was now stealing my future. Finally, desperate and nearly broke, I took the only job I could find, night shift technical support at DataFix Solutions, a company that specialized in helping small businesses recover from computer crashes. 40 hours a week of walking confused entrepreneurs through password resets and explaining why their nephew's computer expertise had actually made everything worse. I worked from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., earning $15 an hour to troubleshoot problems that could have been prevented by the very technology I developed. Then I'd go home to my studio apartment, 400 square feet of survival in a neighborhood where car alarms were the primary source of nighttime music, and spend my days rebuilding Sentinel Core from memory. The original code was locked away in Carter Legacy servers, protected by NDAs and intellectual property agreements that Tyler had crafted to ensure I could never reclaim my work. So I started over, line by line, algorithm by algorithm, building something even better than what he'd stolen. My apartment became a bunker of ambition and desperation. Empty coffee cups covered every surface. My Murphy bed stayed folded up for days at a time because I worked better at the kitchen table. I survived on ramen noodles and the kind of determination that only comes from having nothing left to lose. But Tyler wasn't finished destroying me. 3 months into my exile, I received an email from Venture Capital Solutions, a firm I'd never heard of but whose website looked legitimate enough. They'd somehow heard about my cybersecurity work and wanted to discuss potential funding for Sentinel Core's development. The meeting was set for a sleek downtown office with floor-to-ceiling windows and the kind of modern furniture that screamed success. Marcus Webb, the managing partner, was everything a venture capitalist should be. Expensive suit, confident handshake, the ability to make you feel like the smartest person in the room while he was evaluating whether you were worth his time. "This is revolutionary work, Emily," he said after reviewing my presentation. "We're prepared to offer you $100,000 in seed funding for a 15% equity stake." $100,000. It was more money than I'd ever seen in one place, enough to quit DataFix Solutions, rent proper office space, maybe even hire a developer to help accelerate the process. I should have known it was too good to be true. But I was desperate. The contract signing was scheduled for the following week. I transferred my entire savings account, $50,000 that represented every dollar I'd ever saved, scraped together from my brief time at Carter Legacy, into an escrow account as a show of good faith and commitment to the partnership. Marcus Webb disappeared the next day. The office was empty, the phone number disconnected, the website gone as if it had never existed. $50,000 vanished into the digital ether along with my last shred of hope. I found out later, through a private investigator I could barely afford to hire, that the entire operation had been funded by an anonymous investor who'd specifically requested information about cybersecurity startups founded by former Carter Legacy employees. Tyler had orchestrated my destruction with surgical precision, using my own desperation as the weapon. I went to my parents' home that night, financially destroyed and emotionally shattered, hoping against hope that my family might offer some comfort, some support, some acknowledgement that what had happened to me was wrong. I was naive to the very end. "You lost $50,000 to an online scam," my father said, not even looking up from his Wall Street Journal when I told them what had happened. "Emily, honestly, this is exactly why you're not cut out for business." My mother clicked her tongue disapprovingly. "Sweetheart, maybe this is the universe telling you to come back to reality. There are lovely administrative positions at the country club." "Dad, Tyler set this up. He orchestrated the entire thing to destroy me." "Tyler!" My father finally looked up, his expression more annoyed than concerned. "Tyler is planning his engagement to your sister and building innovations that could transform our company. He doesn't have time to play games with your failed startup fantasies." The casual dismissal cut deeper than any scam ever could. I was their daughter, sitting in their living room, telling them I'd been deliberately destroyed by the man they'd welcomed into our family, and their primary concern was defending him. "You always blame everyone else for your failures," Anthony chimed in from the couch, not even pausing his video game. "Maybe if you'd learned to work with people instead of against them, none of this would have happened." But it was my mother's next words that shattered whatever remained of my hope for family support. "Honestly, Emily, maybe this is for the best. You've been chasing these technology dreams for years, and look where it's gotten you. Broke, alone, and embarrassing the family name with wild conspiracy theories about Tyler." She smiled that practiced smile I'd seen her use on disappointing charity auction results. "Perhaps it's time you accept that some people are meant to lead, and others are meant to follow." I sat there in stunned silence, watching my family dismiss my destruction with the same casual indifference they'd shown my achievements. They weren't just enabling Tyler's cruelty, they were celebrating it because it proved their point that I didn't belong in their world of connections and tradition. That because I looked different, I couldn't be welcome in the family. "Where will you go?" my father asked, and for a moment I thought he might be offering help. "I assume you'll be leaving now, back to your apartment since your scheme to blame Tyler for your failures didn't work. The family image can't afford to be associated with this kind of instability. You have no place here." That's when I understood with crystal clarity that I truly had no family. They weren't just indifferent to my pain, they were relieved by my failure because it validated their decision to exclude me. That night, sitting on my Murphy bed in my studio apartment in the dark, I seriously considered giving up. Not just on Sentinel Core, not just on my career, but on everything. The girl who'd once believed that talent and hard work would eventually triumph had been systematically crushed by men who understood that the game was never about merit, it was about power. But sometimes, when you've lost everything, including the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally, the universe decides to throw you a lifeline. It was 3 a.m. on a Tuesday when the alerts started flooding my personal monitoring system, a crude early warning network I'd built to track cybersecurity threats across major corporate networks. 3 Fortune 500 companies were under simultaneous attack, synchronized SQL injections designed to extract customer databases while masquerading as routine maintenance protocols. The attackers were sophisticated, patient, and very, very good. But they weren't perfect. My reconstructed Sentinel Core algorithms were detecting patterns the victims couldn't see, predicting attack vectors before they were deployed, identifying the signature fingerprints that would lead investigators directly to the perpetrators. I had 2 choices: go back to sleep and let the attack succeed, or spend the next 6 hours of my life saving companies that would never know my name. I chose to fight. By dawn, I had prevented a 4th attack on Acerbit Financial, traced the intrusion back to its source, and compiled a forensic report that would help law enforcement capture an entire cybercriminal network. I sent the intelligence package directly to Acerbit's CISO, along with a simple message. Your company was 37 minutes away from losing 2.3 million customer records. This is how I stopped it. The phone call came 6 hours later. "Ms. Carter, this is Mark Rivera. Chief Information Security Officer at Acerbit Financial. We need to talk. Immediately. Mark was nothing like Tyler. No polished charm, no corporate doublespeak, just a man who understood that results mattered more than pedigree. He offered me a consulting contract that afternoon. $2 million to implement Sentinel Core across Acerbit's entire network infrastructure. I don't care where you went to school, he said, signing the contract without hesitation. I don't care who your references are. I care that you just saved my company from a disaster that would have destroyed us. Within the blink of an eye, my life had totally transformed. And for the first time in 18 months, I smiled. But this was just the beginning. 3 years is a long time in the cybersecurity world. Long enough to transform from a desperate consultant working out of a studio apartment into the CEO of Summit Capital Group, a company that had quietly become one of the most respected names in corporate digital defense. Long enough to forget the taste of ramen noodles and remember what it felt like to sleep through the night without checking bank balances. Summit Capital Group had grown from that single $2 million Acerbit contract into a portfolio worth $200 million. Mark Rivera had become my business partner, handling operations while I focused on technology development and strategic acquisitions. We prevented 17 major cyber attacks, saved our clients over $500 million in potential losses, and earned a reputation for being 3 steps ahead of threats that other firms couldn't even detect. But my family never knew any of this because I chose to remain in the shadows while Mark served as the public face of the company. Maybe I was protecting myself from being seen, still nursing the childhood wound of being ignored, of being treated as the family embarrassment. That's why I was genuinely surprised when my assistant knocked on my office door on a Tuesday morning in April with news that would change everything. "Emily," she said, "we just received an acquisition inquiry through our investment banking partners. There's a mid-sized consulting firm that's actively seeking buyers due to financial distress. They're hemorrhaging money and need a buyer within 6 months to avoid bankruptcy." She paused, consulting her notes. The company is Carter Legacy Industries. I sat there in stunned silence. My father's empire, the company he'd built over 37 years, the legacy he'd refused to let me be part of, was dying. "What's their situation?" I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "Their revenues have declined 40% over the past 2 years. Client retention is down, their technology infrastructure is decades behind industry standards, and they've had to take on significant debt just to meet payroll. Word in the industry is that they're desperate." I nearly smiled at the irony. The same company that had dismissed my innovations as unnecessary was now failing because they'd refused to innovate. "Set up a meeting," I told her. "But keep our involvement anonymous for now. Use our Delaware holding company, Meridian Holdings, as the initial contact. And make sure our due diligence team is extremely thorough." As always, Mark would lead the public negotiations while I remained in the background, analyzing every detail from the shadows. The due diligence process for acquisition is beautifully invasive. To properly assess a company's value and risks, we need access to everything: financial systems, employee databases, email servers, vendor relationships, contract management platforms, every digital interaction the company has had for the past 5 years. What I found in Carter Legacy Systems wasn't just outdated infrastructure and declining revenues. It was a treasure trove of criminal activity that explained exactly why the company was hemorrhaging money. Tyler hadn't just stolen my ideas and destroyed my reputation. He'd been systematically embezzling from my father's company for over 3 years. The sophistication was impressive, I had to admit. Fake vendor contracts with shell companies registered in Delaware. Consulting fees paid to non-existent firms that routed money through offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Equipment purchases that existed only on paper, with funds transferred to personal accounts Tyler controlled under fabricated business names. The total damage was staggering. $6.2 million stolen over 36 months, hidden so cleverly that Carter Legacy's aging accounting software hadn't detected the discrepancies. No wonder the company was on the verge of bankruptcy. Tyler had been bleeding them dry while positioning himself as their innovation savior. But I had detected every fraudulent transaction. Every falsified invoice, every fraudulent wire transfer was laid out in my forensic analysis like a roadmap to Tyler's complete financial destruction. I should have been furious. I should have immediately compiled the evidence and sent it to the FBI, watching Tyler's arrest with the satisfaction of knowing justice had been served. Instead, I found myself smiling for the first time in years, because Tyler Brooks had just handed me the perfect weapon to destroy not just him, but to acquire my father's entire legacy for pennies on the dollar. That night, I called Mark into my office and closed the door behind him. "I need to tell you something," I said, pulling up Carter Legacy's financial records on the main screen. "And I need you to tell me if what I'm thinking is completely insane or absolutely brilliant." Mark studied the embezzlement evidence with the methodical focus that had made him such a valuable partner. After 20 minutes of silence, he leaned back in his chair and looked at me with something between admiration and concern. "You want to buy your father's company," he said. "Not just buy it," I corrected. "I want to own it completely, and I want him to sell it to me without ever knowing who he's really dealing with until it's too late." "That's—" Mark paused, choosing his words carefully. "That's either the most sophisticated revenge plan I've ever heard or the most expensive therapy session in history." Over the following weeks, we constructed an acquisition strategy that was equal parts legal brilliance and poetic justice. We'd approach Richard Carter through our shell corporation, presenting ourselves as a well-funded investment group specializing in turnaround acquisitions of traditional consulting firms. The beauty of the plan was that my father's desperation would do most of the work for us. Carter Legacy Industries was months away from bankruptcy, and Richard Carter couldn't afford to be picky about buyers. The first contact came through our investment banking partners, who reached out to Carter Legacy with an initial offer from Verizon Holdings, a private equity firm specializing in professional services acquisitions. Richard's response was immediate and eager. He was absolutely interested and wanted to move quickly, given their current market challenges. Translation: he was desperate and running out of time. The negotiations took 4 months. 4 months of my father unknowingly selling his life's work to the daughter he disowned, accepting our offer of $60 million for a company that would have been worth twice that before Tyler's embezzlement destroyed its financial foundation. Every signature he placed on transfer documents was another step toward my complete victory. Every asset he sold was another piece of his legacy that now belonged to me. Every dollar he received came from the success of the company I'd built after he threw me away. But the most beautiful irony was yet to come. During the final due diligence phase, I discovered that Tyler's embezzlement had accelerated dramatically in recent months. He wasn't just stealing money anymore, he was preparing to disappear. Bank records showed wire transfers to accounts in Switzerland and Singapore, property purchases under shell company names, even a yacht registered in the Bahamas under one of his fabricated business entities. Tyler Brooks was getting ready to vanish with over $4 million of my father's money, leaving Carter Legacy Industries completely bankrupt and my family destroyed. And he had no idea that I knew everything, or that I now owned the company he'd been robbing. I kept Tyler's secret, watching him steal more money each week, documenting every crime with forensic precision. Because I didn't want him to just get arrested. I didn't want him to just go to prison. I wanted him to be destroyed in front of everyone who had ever believed in him at the moment when he thought he had won everything. Then I received a letter that turned my stomach and then made me smile. The invitation arrived on cream-colored cardstock with gold-embossed lettering, addressed to Ms. Emily Carter, in Jessica's perfect handwriting. Inside, a formal request for my presence at the wedding of Jessica Marie Carter and Tyler James Brooks at St. Margaret's Cathedral. I stared at it for a full minute, bile rising in my throat. They wanted me there, the family embarrassment, the daughter they'd dismissed and abandoned, to witness Tyler's ultimate victory, to watch him officially become the son they'd always wanted while I sat in the shadows, a reminder of their superior judgment. "You're not seriously considering going," Mark said when I showed him the invitation. "I'm considering burning it," I replied, tossing the card onto my desk. 3 years of radio silence, and now they want me to play happy family while Tyler marries my sister with stolen money. But something nagged at me. Tyler's embezzlement was accelerating, and he was planning his escape. What better cover for a final heist than his own wedding? He'd have access to wedding gifts, family accounts, maybe even my parents' personal finances during the celebration. Mark leaned back in his chair, studying my face. "You're thinking about exposing him there, aren't you?" The thought had crossed my mind. Emily, that's either brilliant or completely insane. You'd be walking into enemy territory. I picked up the invitation again, running my fingers over the expensive paper. Maybe it's time they learned exactly who they've been underestimating all these years. Mark was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled. I'll start preparing the evidence files. If you're going to destroy him, we might as well do it properly. Before the wedding, I thought I might as well do something nice for my family. They rejected me, but to me, they were still family, or so I thought. The Carter family compound sat on 12 acres of manicured perfection in Lake Forest, the kind of estate that screamed old money and established power. It was where I'd grown up feeling like a guest in my own home, where family dinners had become monthly reminders of my inadequacy, where Tyler had charmed his way into becoming the son my father always wanted. At exactly 2 p.m., 3 car carriers rolled through the iron gates, each one carrying a machine that cost more than most people's houses. The drivers were professional, efficient, and completely unaware that they were delivering the opening act to the most expensive revenge plot in family history. First came the Tesla Model S Plaid, $140,000 of electric engineering perfection, finished in pearl white with custom leather interior. My father's dream car, the one Jessica told me he mentioned casually during last year's Christmas dinner, never imagining his disappointment daughter would be the one to get it for him. Next, the BMW i8 for Anthony, $160,000 of hybrid supercar technology that would make his country club friends sick with envy. Butterfly doors, heads-up display, the kind of car that turned parking lots into photo shoots. Finally, the Mercedes-AMG GT for Jessica, $200,000 of German precision wrapped in metallic silver, with the kind of exhaust note that announced your arrival 3 blocks away. Each car came with an identical card, handwritten on cream-colored stationery, from your daughter/sister who's always believed in family. Love, Emily. I watched from my own car, a modest Honda Civic I'd kept specifically for moments like this, as my family discovered their gifts. The excitement was immediate and intoxicating. Anthony actually hooped like a teenager, running his hands along the BMW's curves while pulling out his phone to record everything. Jessica squealed with delight, already posing for Instagram photos beside the Mercedes. But it was my father's reaction that I'd come to see. Richard Carter stood beside the Tesla, his businessman's composure cracking just enough to reveal genuine surprise. For a moment, he looked almost guilty, the expression of someone who'd received unexpected kindness from a person they'd treated poorly. Then the phone started ringing. My mother called first, her voice a mixture of excitement and confusion that I could hear through the car window. Emily, sweetheart, these cars are absolutely gorgeous, but we can't possibly accept. Of course you can, I interrupted, keeping my voice warm and generous. It's Jessica's wedding weekend. I wanted to do something special for the whole family. For a moment I could hear guilt in the way my father cleared his throat when he took the phone, the unusual softness in his voice when he said, Emily, this is incredibly generous of you. But where did you get the money for? I've been saving, I lied smoothly, and I got a small bonus at my consulting job. I just wanted to do something nice for family. But even as they accepted the gifts, I could hear the condescension creeping back into their voices. Anthony's wife wondered loudly whether the cars were actually new or just very good rentals. Jessica mentioned that she hoped I hadn't overextended myself financially just to impress them. And my father, dear predictable Richard, delivered exactly the line I'd been half expecting. It's touching that you want to buy your way back into this family, Emily. But you should know that gestures like this don't erase years of disappointment. The words stung, just as they were meant to. But I absorbed them like fuel, storing them away for tomorrow's reckoning. And now, standing in the center aisle of St. Margaret's Cathedral with 300 pairs of eyes burning into me, tomorrow had arrived. The processional music was supposed to begin any moment when my father did something unprecedented. He stepped forward, raising his hand toward the organ balcony, and the music stopped mid-note. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, his voice carrying the same authority that had closed million-dollar deals for decades. Before we witness this sacred union, I hope you'll indulge me for a moment. I have an announcement that makes this day even more special. The congregation shifted restlessly, This wasn't part of the program. My mother sat frozen in the front pew, her composure cracking just enough to reveal genuine panic. 3 weeks ago, my father continued, his chest swelling with pride, I finalized the sale of Carter Legacy Industries to Meridian Holdings for $60 million. This transaction secures my children's future, my real children who've earned their place in this family. My stomach dropped, but not with shock, with anticipation. Anthony, he gestured toward my brother, who built our client relationships with unwavering loyalty. Jessica, his voice softened as he looked toward the back of the church, who brought honor to our name and chose a partner worthy of our legacy. The pause felt eternal. I could feel 300 pairs of eyes beginning to turn toward me, sensing what was coming. But there's dead weight that needs to be cut loose, he said, his gaze finding mine across the mahogany pews. His expression hardened into something cold and final. Emily, you've been nothing but a disappointment and disgrace to this family. Your reckless ideas, your stubborn refusal to understand how real business works, your complete inability to contribute anything meaningful, and your attempt to use money to buy your way back into this family. The cathedral fell silent except for scattered gasps from the guests. You're getting nothing from my legacy, he continued, each word a hammer blow. Nothing. As far as I'm concerned, you were a mistake I should have corrected years ago. You're no longer my daughter. Tyler's grin widened at the altar. Several guests shifted uncomfortably. My mother closed her eyes, unable to watch my public execution. For a moment, I absorbed the weight of his words, feeling the stares of 300 people who just watched my father disown me in the house of God. But instead of the familiar sting of rejection, I felt something else entirely. Relief. Because something else had shifted. I realized that no matter what I did or who I'd become, I would never be accepted. I stood slowly, my years of boardroom negotiations flooding back to give me perfect composure. Every eye in the cathedral followed me as I stepped into the center aisle. Dad, I said, my voice carrying clearly without strain. You're absolutely right about one thing. His eyebrows furrowed, clearly not expecting a response, let alone one delivered with such calm certainty. I am getting nothing from your legacy, I continued, allowing a small smile to play on my lips. But that's because I already own everything. The confusion on his face was beautiful. 300 guests leaned forward in their seats. I am Summit Capital Group, I announced, my voice steady and clear. Congratulations, Dad. You just sold your entire life's work to the mistake you should have corrected years ago. You're no longer my daughter. Tyler's grin widened at the altar. Several guests shifted uncomfortably. My mother closed her eyes, unable to watch my public execution. For a moment, I absorbed the weight of his words, feeling the stares of 300 people who just watched my father disown me in the house of God. But instead of the familiar sting of rejection, I felt something else entirely. Relief. Because something else had shifted, I realized that no matter what I did or who I'd become, I would never be accepted. I stood slowly, my years of boardroom negotiations flooding back to give me perfect composure. Every eye in the cathedral followed me as I stepped into the center aisle. Dad, I said, my voice carrying clearly without strain. You're absolutely right about one thing. His eyebrows furrowed, clearly not expecting a response, let alone one delivered with such calm certainty. I am getting nothing from your legacy, I continued, allowing a small smile to play on my lips. But that's because I already own everything. The confusion on his face was beautiful. 300 guests leaned forward in their seats. I am Summit Capital Group, I announced, my voice steady and clear. Congratulations, Dad. You just sold your entire life's work to the mistake you should have corrected years ago. The silence stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. My father's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and was now settling into something that looked dangerously close to panic. The signed purchase agreement in my hand felt like a loaded weapon, and I was about to pull the trigger. The silence stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. My father's face had cycled through confusion, disbelief, and was now settling into something that looked dangerously close to panic. The signed purchase agreement in my hand felt like a loaded weapon, and I was about to pull the trigger. That's impossible, he whispered, but his voice carried in the cathedral's perfect acoustics. I would never sell to. He stopped, his throat working like he was choking on the words. To your own daughter. I finished for him, taking a step closer down the aisle. The one you just disowned in front of 300 people? The disappointment, who apparently can't contribute anything meaningful. I held up the document higher, making sure everyone could see his signature at the bottom. Summit Capital Group, represented by Emily Sarah Carter, Chief Executive Officer. You've been selling your company to me for 4 months, Dad. Piece by piece, share by share. The cathedral erupted in whispers and gasps. I could see phones being pulled out, recording everything. This would be on social media within minutes. Richard's face had gone ashen. But the lawyers said, the representatives, said it was an investment consortium from Delaware. Shell corporations, I explained calmly, enjoying every second of his confusion. Nominee shareholders. Legal structures designed to obscure ownership until acquisition was complete. You taught me something valuable, Dad. Sometimes the most devastating attacks come from enemies you never see coming. Anthony stood up from the front pew, his face flushed with anger. Emily, this is insane. You can't just... Can't what? I turned my attention to my brother. Can't legally purchase a company that was put up for sale? Can't succeed after being told I was worthless? Which part exactly is insane, Anthony? My mother was crying now, her perfect makeup running in black streaks down her cheeks. The wedding guests were murmuring, some standing to get a better view of the family meltdown happening before their eyes. But I wasn't finished. Not even close. Actually, I said, pulling out my phone with theatrical precision, there's something else you all should know about your precious Tyler. Tyler, who had been frozen at the altar like a deer in headlights, suddenly came alive. Emily, whatever you think you know. I know everything. I swiped the screen of my phone, and the big screen behind the pulpit flickered to life. Fake invoices to shell companies. Wire transfers to offshore accounts. $2.3 million stolen from Carter Legacy Industries over the past 27 months. The silence was deafening. I could hear my father's labored breathing from 15 feet away. Tyler Brooks, I continued, advancing slowly down the aisle like a prosecutor presenting evidence to a jury, has been systematically embezzling from the company you just sold to me. Would you like to see the bank records? The fabricated vendor contracts? The property purchases in the Cayman Islands? Tyler's face had gone white. Those are private financial records. You can't legally. I can legally do whatever I want with my own company's financial records, I said, my voice cutting through his protest like a blade. Remember? I own 73% of Carter Legacy Industries now. That makes me Tyler's boss, and employers have every right to investigate employee theft. I swiped to the next screenshot, a bank transfer for $127,000 to an account in Switzerland. This one's from last Tuesday. You've been accelerating the theft, Tyler. Getting ready for your disappearance act. That's when Tyler broke and ran. He pushed past the pastor, stumbled down the altar steps, and sprinted toward the cathedral's side exit like a man whose life depended on escape. The wedding guests gasped and turned in their seats, craning their necks to follow the drama. But Tyler made it exactly 12 feet before 2 men in dark suits stepped into his path. Tyler Brooks, one of them said, producing a badge. FBI Financial Crimes Division. You need to come with us. The cathedral exploded. 300 people talking at once, phones recording everything, my mother sobbing hysterically while my father sat down heavily in the front pew like his legs had given out. Jessica, still frozen at the back of the church in her $15,000 wedding dress, finally found her voice. I knew, she whispered, but somehow everyone heard her. I knew something was wrong with the finances, but I was too scared to lose him. Too scared to ask questions because everyone said he was perfect for our family. She looked directly at me, mascara streaming down her face. Emily, I'm so sorry. I knew you were right about him, but I was too weak to. You weren't weak, I interrupted, my voice gentler now. You were manipulated. We all were. Tyler is very good at making people see what he wants them to see. The FBI agents were cuffing Tyler now, reading him his rights while wedding guests recorded everything on their phones. The irony wasn't lost on me. Tyler Brooks, who'd stolen my ideas and destroyed my reputation, being arrested at his own wedding for stealing money from the company I now owned. But I still had one more bomb to drop. "There's something else," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the chaos. "Tyler, remember our conversation last month? The one where you thought you were talking to your accomplice, but you were actually talking to me." Tyler's head snapped up from where the agents were restraining him. "What conversation?" I held up my phone again, this time showing a recording app. "The one where you admitted to the embezzlement. Where you said you planned to take the company public and cash out before anyone figured out the missing money. The one where you called my father a stupid old man who deserves everything that's coming to him." I pressed play. Tyler's voice filled the cathedral through my phone's speaker, crystal clear and damning. "The old bastard has no idea how much I've taken. By the time anyone figures it out, I'll be on a beach in the Bahamas with enough money to last 3 lifetimes. Emily's investigation doesn't matter. She has no proof, no authority, and no one believes her anyway." The recording continued for 30 more seconds, Tyler's voice outlining his complete plan to destroy Carter Legacy Industries and disappear with millions in stolen funds. Richard's face crumpled. The man who'd built his company through relationships and trust had just heard his chosen son-in-law call him a stupid old bastard while planning to rob him blind. 3 months, I said, pocketing my phone. "I've been recording conversations with Tyler for 3 months, documenting every crime, every lie, every moment of his true character while you all insisted he was perfect for this family." Tyler was screaming now as the FBI agents dragged him toward the exit. "This is entrapment. She set me up. She's been planning this for years. Actually," I called after him, "you're right. I've been planning since the day you got me fired from my own family's company and defrauded me of $50,000. The cathedral doors slammed shut behind Tyler and his escorts, leaving 300 wedding guests in stunned silence. I turned back to my family, who were staring at me like I'd transformed into someone they'd never seen before. Which, in a way, I had. "You know," I said, my voice carrying the calm authority I'd learned in boardrooms and crisis management meetings. "Yesterday you all accused me of trying to buy my way back into this family with those cars. You said I was trying to impress you, that gestures don't erase years of disappointment." My father looked up at me, his eyes hollow with defeat. "Well, you were right about one thing," I continued. "I was trying to buy something yesterday, but it wasn't your approval. It wasn't a place in this family. It was closure." I walked back toward my pew, gathering my purse with deliberate calm. "The cars are being repossessed as we speak. Not because I can't afford them. I could buy each of you a different luxury car every month for the next 5 years without thinking about the cost. But because you don't deserve them. You never did." I paused at the end of my row, looking back at the wreckage of what was supposed to be Jessica's perfect wedding. "Congratulations, Dad. You got exactly what you wanted. A family legacy built on relationships and trust. Too bad you chose to trust the wrong person." The silence that followed me out of St. Margaret's Cathedral was the sound of a family finally understanding that their biggest mistake wasn't underestimating me. It was thinking I would always be there for them to underestimate. The cathedral doors slammed shut behind Tyler and the FBI agents, but the echo seemed to go on forever. 300 wedding guests sat in stunned silence, their phones still recording, still capturing every second of my family's complete destruction. The altar stood empty except for the pastor, who looked like he was questioning every life choice that had led him to this moment. My father remained slumped in the front pew, staring at the signed purchase agreements in his lap like they might spontaneously combust. The reality was finally sinking in. He had sold his life's work for pennies on the dollar to the daughter he'd just disowned, and his chosen son-in-law had robbed him blind while planning to disappear to the Bahamas. "This can't be legal," he said, his voice hoarse and desperate. "The sale was under duress. Fraud. I was misled about the buyer's identity." "You were misled about nothing," I interrupted, walking back down the aisle toward him. "Every document you signed was legally accurate. Summit Capital Group, represented by Emily Carter, CEO. My name is on every single contract, Dad. You just never bothered to read past the letterhead." He looked up at me with eyes that had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. "But the lawyers, they said it was an investment consortium." "Which it was. A consortium of shell corporations that I legally established and properly registered. You wanted to sell to someone who understood the value of relationships and trust, remember? Congratulations. You sold to someone who understood exactly how little you valued both. Anthony finally found his voice from where he stood near the altar. Emily, wait. We're family. We can work this out. There has to be some kind of arrangement we can make. The laugh that escaped me was sharp enough to cut glass. Family. I turned to face my brother, the man who'd sat silent through years of my father's dismissals, who'd watched Tyler steal my ideas without saying a word, who'd never once defended me when it mattered. Anthony, you made it very clear I wasn't family. I was just the disappointment, the dead weight that needed to be cut loose. That's not what I meant. That's exactly what you meant. What you all meant. I could feel the cathedral's attention focused entirely on our family drama, but I didn't care anymore. When Tyler got promoted over me, where were you? When Tyler, with Dad's approval, fired me for undermining authority, where were you? When I was working night shifts at tech support while rebuilding my entire career from nothing, where was my loving brother then? Anthony's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. There was no answer because there had been no support, no family loyalty when I needed it most. Jessica finally moved from her position at the back of the church, her wedding dress trailing behind her like a symbol of dreams turned to ash. Mascara streaked her face, and her hands shook as she approached. Emily, she whispered, I need you to know. I knew something was wrong. Tyler's stories about money never added up. He'd have expensive things, but claim they were gifts or bonuses that seemed too good to be true. When he proposed, he insisted on a prenup that gave him control of everything if we divorced. Her voice broke completely. I was scared to ask questions because everyone said he was perfect for our family. Dad loved him. Mom thought he was charming. Anthony said he was brilliant. I thought if I ruined this relationship, I'd be letting everyone down just like I always did. I finished. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry. I should have listened to you. I should have believed you when you said something was off about him. But I was so tired of being the good daughter, the one who never caused problems, that I ignored every red flag. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something other than cold satisfaction. Jessica had been manipulated, just like the rest of us, but at least she was admitting it. Jessica, I said more gently, Tyler is a sociopath. He's very good at making people see what they want to see. You're not stupid for falling for his act. You're human. My father struggled to his feet, desperation making him bolder. Emily, please. There has to be something we can do. Some way to undo this. I'll give you anything you want. You already did. Since I owned 73% of Carter Legacy Industries, I continued. I can do with it as I please. The sound my father made wasn't quite human. It was the noise of a man watching his entire world collapse in real time, realizing that every move he'd made to defeat me had only made me stronger. Anthony sank into a pew like his legs had given out. You planned this entire thing. I planned to succeed despite you. I corrected. Everything else was just you all making choices that happened to benefit me. Tyler chose to steal money. Dad chose to sell the company. You chose to stay silent. Jessica chose Tyler over family loyalty, at least initially. I looked around at the wreckage of what was supposed to be a celebration of new beginnings. The beautiful irony is that if you just treated me with basic respect, none of this would have happened. I would have been happy being your daughter, your sister, your employee. But you taught me something valuable. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's getting everything. The silence that followed was broken only by my mother's quiet sobbing and the distant sound of sirens as more FBI vehicles arrived to process the crime scene that Tyler had turned Jessica's wedding into. As I walked toward the cathedral exit, leaving my family to contemplate the ruins of their legacy, I couldn't help but smile. They'd finally gotten what they always wanted, a clear understanding of exactly who I was capable of becoming when pushed too far. 6 months after the wedding that became a crime scene, I sat in the federal courthouse's gallery watching Tyler Brooks receive his sentence. 8 years for embezzlement, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit theft. The judge's words echoed through the marble-lined courtroom. Mr. Brooks, your crimes represent a profound betrayal of trust that goes far beyond monetary damage. Tyler had tried everything, blaming me for entrapment, claiming the recordings were fabricated, even attempting to pin the embezzlement on fictional co-conspirators. None of it worked. The forensic evidence was too thorough, the paper trail too detailed, the recorded confessions too damning. As the bailiff led him away in shackles, Tyler's eyes found mine across the courtroom. The confident smirk that had once charmed my family was gone, replaced by the hollow stare of a man who'd finally run out of people to manipulate. Jessica sat beside me, her hand squeezing mine as the courtroom doors closed behind her former fiancé. She'd been Tyler's most devastating witness, testifying about his attempts to manipulate her into signing documents that would have given him access to trust funds and family assets. Her courage in facing him had been remarkable to watch. "It's really over," she whispered. "This part is," I replied. "But the best part is just beginning." Carter Legacy Industries had been officially absorbed into Summit Capital Group 3 months earlier. The transition had been surgical in its efficiency. Every client retained, every employee evaluated based on merit rather than family connections, every outdated system replaced with cutting-edge technology. My father had chosen to take the money he got from the sale of his company to me and retire early. The proud patriarch, who'd once commanded boardrooms, now spent his days playing golf alone, his country club friends having distanced themselves after the scandal made national business news. Anthony had tried to maintain his position after the sale, presenting his MBA credentials and relationship-building experience as valuable assets for the new company's structure. The conversation lasted exactly 12 minutes. "Your degree is impressive," I told him in the same boardroom where he'd once watched me be dismissed. "But this company runs on innovation, not inherited connections. Your skill set doesn't align with our technical requirements." He'd left that day, carrying his belongings in a cardboard box. But Jessica had chosen a different path entirely. After Tyler's arrest, she'd thrown herself into helping with the investigation, providing financial records she'd secretly copied, revealing conversations she'd overheard, giving prosecutors everything they needed to build their case. She'd also started attending community college, studying computer science. Inspired, she said, by watching me build an empire from code and determination. "I spent so many years trying to be the perfect daughter that I forgot to figure out who I actually wanted to be," she told me during one of our coffee meetings. "Watching you refuse to give up taught me that maybe I don't have to be perfect. Maybe I just have to be brave." Our relationship was still rebuilding, trust restored one honest conversation at a time. But she was the only family member who'd chosen redemption over resentment, and I respected her for that courage. Summit Capital Group now employed over 400 people across 5 offices, with a valuation that had reached $500 million. Industry publications had started calling me the cybersecurity prodigy, and a top business review magazine wanted to do a case study on disruptive innovation in traditional service industries. At 32, I was one of the youngest well-regarded female CEOs in the cybersecurity sector, invited to speak at conferences where audience members hung on every word about building technological solutions for tomorrow's threats. But the most satisfying moment came during a board meeting when Mark Rivera, now my COO, presented our quarterly results. We prevented 43 major cyber attacks, saved our clients over $2 billion in potential losses, and established partnerships with Fortune 100 companies that viewed us as essential infrastructure rather than optional services. "5 years ago," Mark said, grinning at the numbers on his screen, "you were working night shifts at tech support. Now you're running a company that the FBI consults for national security threats." The transformation was complete, but it hadn't just been professional. Somewhere in the process of building an empire from nothing, I discovered something more valuable than revenge: self-respect. I no longer needed my father's approval or my family's acceptance. I'd found my worth in the work I did, the people I protected, the innovations I created. The girl who'd once begged for a chance to prove herself had been replaced by a woman who knew exactly what she was capable of achieving. That didn't mean the victory wasn't sweet. Every business magazine profile, every industry award, every client testimonial was proof that they'd been wrong about me. But more importantly, it was proof that I'd been right about myself all along. The final legal papers dissolving Carter Legacy Industries had been signed on a Tuesday morning in November. 37 years of my father's legacy absorbed completely into the company his disappointment daughter had built from his rejection. As I walked out of the lawyer's office that day, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Anger had been fuel, but fuel burns away once it serves its purpose. What remained was something more powerful, absolute certainty in my own capabilities. They taught me something valuable after all. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is having people who underestimate you decide you're not worth their time. It gives you the freedom to become everything they never imagined you could be.